I'm Shachar Azani, and welcome to this episode of Eye on Israel, exploring the fight for Israel in the field of public opinion and sharing its untold news. Untold News is a nimble non-profit spreading the Israeli innovation word in novel and interesting ways. Strictly non-political, Untold News educates Americans about Israel's contributions to the world in science, medicine, technology, agriculture, the environment, and Israel's world-leading humanitarian acts, among others. The organization covers news from Israeli Jewish sources and from Christian as well as non-denominational sources such as medical, scientific, business, and mainstream media outlets. Marcella Rosen is the founder and visionary behind Untold News. She held top management positions in advertising and internet campaigns and managed budgets of over $1 billion for the largest companies in the United States. In 2010, Marcella founded Untold News to strengthen perceptions of Israel in the United States. In 2015, she received a Distinguished Alumni Award from Barnard College, and she has a BA from Barnard College and an MA in Clinical Psychology from Teachers College at Columbia. A native New Yorker, she has a son, a daughter, and 4 perfect grandchildren. Marcella, thank you so much for joining me today right here at JBS Studios in Times Square.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
The first question that comes to mind, I'm sure for all of our viewers, you have such a compelling professional background in advertising and beyond. What made you do what you do today with regards to Israel?
Well, I was sitting as head of media worldwide for a large ad agency in 1992, a long time ago. And it was the year of the woman. And I sat there and I had asked, everybody wanted to talk to me because we spent so much money for General Motors, AT&T, Procter & Gamble. And I realized that we had to do something about the situation. So I encouraged people I knew in the business, all of whom came and worked with me. And I got the best creative director I knew to design an ad, which was a picture of a woman without a mouth. Headline, most politicians still think women should be seen and not heard. Make them listen, vote. And 13% more women voted, 4% more men.
As a result of your campaign?
We were a piece of it. I don't want to say that. But we were in every major magazine. We got television time. We got $3 million worth of free time and space from the people in the industry. I was sitting in the right chair, and it was the right issue. And it was by far the most heartening thing I had ever done. And so that was my first attempt.
And how did that lead you to fighting for the State of Israel?
Well, I always cared about the State of Israel. That was in my DNA.
Not to be taken for granted?
No. My father was very active there, and my parents were both very interested from way back. I kept seeing that here I was. I stumbled into advertising. I knew about getting messaging across.
Right.
That nobody was hearing anything much about Israel except for the battles and the Palestinians.
Right.
And so I thought that it was vital to start on college campuses, which is where we started. We ran in the college newspaper. Doesn't exist anymore. At the time, you could run a series of 10 ads for $800. No, for $8,000. And multiplied by 20, you didn't spend that much money, and we ran it, and it was very successful as measured by research.
Before we touch upon the campaigns, I just want to understand from the outset, what do you think is missing? What gap are you trying to fill in the sea of information that exists out there about Israel?
Well, there are more than 200 countries in the world. Nobody knows much about most of them. Right. Even the ones I've traveled to, I couldn't tell you about their government, how they treat minorities or anything else. And Israel, unfortunately, has been the victim of bad publicity by its enemies and by people who may not like Jews so much either. Right. But for years, and nobody has told the positives about Israel. The media doesn't, the American media is a little biased, they don't report it. And Israel has never done a job on it. I almost wonder if it's in the culture that they won't believe us anyhow, why should we bother?
Right.
I'm not sure that's true, but that's one guess.
Sometimes that's definitely what it looks like.
It sure does. And yet, of all the countries you could talk about and the ones we all travel to and visit, Israel's done phenomenally. I mean, I think they were number 8 and number 5 in the most innovative country on earth, according to the Bloomberg Index. You look at the things they've created, and you look at the history with people from 80 different countries speaking different languages, coming in desperation and managing to create, invent, live in the desert. And it's been consistent. So first of all, the inventions are amazing. And we have, this is the Hispanic.
I know the book is coming, but I just want to, I want to take our viewers through the journey, because you've been immersed in it for years now, of fighting for Israel. 10 years.
A little longer, yeah.
Fighting for Israel.
Right.
And as an executive in that world, you look at the picture and you see that Israel's story is not being told.
Not at all.
But I want to ask you, there are so many organizations out there who supposedly are trying to fight for Israel in the realm of public opinion. How are you different? When you brought Untold News to be, what was your vision that was somewhat different from the mainstream?
Well, that's actually an easy question, because there was no such vision in the mainstream. Every time something bad happens in Israel, every organization holds a meeting about it.
Right.
They talk about it. They don't do anything about it. It has been true for a long time, and the most frustrating thing, since I'm out of marketing and know you can change attitudes and what you can do, is to see nothing being done and mostly being ignored, except to say, this is terrible for us, will help us raise money. And I think our organizations do a lot of good work in creating community. I don't think they do any job to speak of in terms of educating people about the truth of Israel.
Right. The truth of Israel, by the way, that exists beyond the geopolitics. Like, we know that there are issues, there are politics, there is conflict, but there is so much more to Israel, Marcella.
That's exactly right. And it has major contributions to the world in every respect, not just that they invent the solutions, but they go and they help people work them out, and they send people all over the world to help people in need, and they do incredible things. I am certainly not saying Israel is perfect. Nobody's perfect.
Right.
Countries certainly are not perfect.
Right.
But they do much more than most other countries do, and nobody even knows it.
So when you decided to come up with Untold News, how did your family react? What did your friends tell you? How did your surroundings react to that urge of yours to do?
Some of them who also cared thought it was great. Some who didn't care much. Some of them supported me. But the important thing was to start thinking, as you do in marketing, which is, what are we trying to accomplish?
Right.
Who do we want to reach, and how do we do that?
Let's repeat that. Can you please repeat? And for the sake of our viewers, I want you to take a moment and listen, because many a time, and that's something I personally speak about often, is we do a lot of kishka diplomacy. We tell people what we want to tell people. We don't think about what is it that we're saying, who is our target audience, and I love it. I love it, Marcella, that you chose to focus. Please repeat those 3 points for our viewers.
Well, you've got to decide what you're trying to accomplish.
Right.
Then you've got to figure out who you want to convince about it.
Right.
And then the third piece, of course, is how do you reach them?
Exactly.
And the fourth, when you can, is can you measure it?
Can you measure it?
Yeah. And it's much easier if you start out with $30 million or something, which unfortunately I did not. So that even if we've done everything perfectly, I think the most we had in a given year was 300,000.
Right.
And a couple of my supporters had the nerve to die, and so that's what happens. So we did what we could with what we had, and
but that kind of thinking. Were you surprised by the fact that kind of professional thinking was not? You didn't encounter it too often when it came to representing Israel and its story?
I was very surprised, but I would say that I've been on a lot of nonprofit boards,
right,
and most of them don't know anything about communications and like to do it themselves.
Right.
As a result, don't do it too well. Not because I think somebody couldn't have a great idea who was not in the business. Of course they could. But if you don't know what you're doing, and if you're really worried that if you change things too much, you may not have a job because you're not such an expert on that subject, nonprofits have a big problem with it.
Right, and you come with such incredible professional background in this field that really put you in this position in a smooth manner that allowed you to lead this endeavor.
I guess because I'd had experience with small agencies, large agencies. One of the best, Doyle Dane Bernbach, was the one who first gave me a job as an account exec. There were no women.
Wow.
So I happened to get not only the job finally, but an agency that could do nothing badly. I mean, think about, you don't have to be Jewish to eat Levy's bread.
Right.
Brilliant campaign, picture of an Indian, picture of,
Right.
they couldn't do anything wrong, Volkswagen,
Right.
So you saw it in action and the difference it could make if it was a good agency.
So as Untold News, what was the first thing that you did?
We ran the ads in college newspapers at 20 universities because I was after younger people and wanting to tell them the positives about Israel. It seems they were different topics, and it was actually about 12 years ago as I think about it. But we talked about the battle with the Palestinians, and I didn't bring that to show you, but I could have. And that was the first. From there, we did some ads.
So you're trying to complement the picture, trying to complete the picture for the general public and students on college campuses when it comes to Israel, because they're very much accustomed to hearing everything about the conflict.
That's all they heard about,
but
and that's
they're
all they
missing
hear.
So much. But you know what I adore the most about this is it's not just different information about Israel, but it's relevant information for them.
It's vital for them.
For them.
That's the point, exactly. And so, and I happened to be able to enlist a great creative director from Y&R, whose name is Marv Waldman, and who's terrific, and Steve Farkas, who has his own research company, who played a major role. And you do need people who get it and know how to fix it.
Right.
And so that's what we've been doing. And in terms of targeting, we started out with Facebook. No, actually, we started with the New York Times, where we ran 3 ads, quarter of a page, to say, you can do something about this. Here, look.
Right.
Didn't get us anywhere, but we did it. And then we started on Facebook.
Well, I remember encountering those ads years ago, picking up the New York Times myself and suddenly seeing this, and it made me so happy, not just to see pro-Israel presence, but such avant-garde thinking about representing Israel, not being confined to what our enemies define us
Not
as,
at all.
in the realm of politics and conflict, but venturing onwards to other realms that might interest and be relevant to other people more than anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism.
Absolutely, because it's good for you. So that we started on Facebook because we wanted to get some coverage quickly.
Right.
I'm the first one to say that is not my prime target. Those are mostly people who care about Israel. They may be Jewish, they may not be Jewish, want the information, spread it out. My real target is younger Americans, future leaders, college students. And so we have run ads in college magazines. There's a company called the Ivy League Network. It's got about 10 schools. And so we have run pages in their quarterly magazines, talking about Israeli inventions, talking about primarily the fact that Bill Gates said nice things about Israel. And
quotes from luminaries.
Yeah.
And you even came up with a book.
Yes, we did, because we thought nobody knows about it. So the book is called Tiny Dynamo.
Hold it up.
And this is the Spanish version, El Pequeño Dinamo, which was done for the Hispanic section of the population. If we'd had enough money and players, we would have done it for the Chinese. We would have done it for for every group. But we did at least do this, and we started a Facebook page for them, which has about 50,000 people on it now. Our basic Facebook page. All of them put together are about 800,000 fans now.
Incredible.
And
what
we
a great reach. So what did you include in the book?
Some of the things we knew about earlier. It's everything from desalting the ocean to freezing breast tumors instead of cancer to, it's a whole, huge
So all
bunch.
of these are inventions and
These are-
developments relevant for the ordinary person.
That's
Because
right.
when the ordinary person, you know, who has to struggle with the economy, cope with issues of public health and transportation, doesn't really care about, you know, the geostrategic interactions
Not
between
at all.
Israel and the US. It's not relevant to me in my daily life. And I found myself, from my experience, that people, you know, if I don't care, then when you tell something nasty about Israel, that's fine. I might believe it. But if I knew something about Israel that resonated with me,
Nope.
that touched my heart, I would ask myself, hey, that doesn't really coincide
that's right.
with other information
Maybe
I
I
gathered.
don't know what it's all about.
Right.
Which is exactly what we're trying to do. I mean, it's got desalting the ocean. It's the pill cam,
Right.
which is a camera that goes through your intestines.
You know, I'm thinking about your personal story, Marcella, as somebody who fought for women. And looking at Israel also as one of the prominent places. And you know, I'm looking into the history. This year we're supposed to see the new Golda movie, but one of the only places when, you know, standing up for women wasn't a thing. Israel already had a woman who was a prominent leader and later on prime minister before it was, fashionable to talk about these issues. It was woke long before woke.
It was so incredible when you think about throwing out the ideas and brains of half the population for centuries.
Right.
It just makes no sense
So
whatsoever.
in a way, you are a manifestation of the message that you're conveying. You are true to your message and who you are as a person as well. That authenticity resonates with target audiences, because when you talk about Israel as a prominent bastion of rights, and you yourself stand up for these rights and professionally have done so, then you echo the truth from within who you are, which makes you very believable.
Well, I hope so, because I do care passionately, obviously. I had incredible parents. My father was a leader, and he was an Orthodox rabbi and a professor of philosophy and ethics at Yeshiva, wrote about 10 books, but he also was very involved in American politics and the anti-McCarran movement in Israel at the Joint, had a major job years ago. And so it was just part of the DNA, so to speak.
Yeah, and that brought you talked before about measuring success. Let's talk for a minute about that campaign on college campuses. You put in the ads. What was success to you?
There was a research company who offered to test it and see what they found. They found it changed attitudes.
What does that mean?
It means that people had never heard of any of these things, and they asked them before how they felt about Israel on some scale, and they asked them afterwards.
So people actually, they knew more?
They knew more, and they were somewhat more positive, yeah.
And when you talk about young people as opposed to general public, how do you differentiate in the work that you do between different target audiences? What kind of messaging do you choose? Is it the same messaging or is it different?
It's basically one target audience, and it's the same messaging. No, not totally. Let's say 18 to 25-year-olds in college or college graduates. That's the basic messaging, because they know nothing, and we want them to feel positive.
And when you say they know nothing, what does that mean? Do they really lack any kind of relevant information when it comes to Israel?
Mostly, but they do about most countries, except for the few you might visit. What do you know about Morocco and Tangiers and Argentina? And nothing.
Right.
You don't. It's complicated.
But you know that now you're also shedding light on one of the most interesting points, because we assume knowledge. You know, in many cases when it comes to Israel, we assume the people we speak to know exactly as much as we do. So now we can debate with them on the Talmud, right?
Yeah.
We can go into the Gemara, we can discuss the small fringes without even realizing sometimes.
It's not.
They don't even know what a Jew looks like, what an Israeli is, thinking that all Israelis are Jewish.
Yeah.
Thinking, you know,
That's
one
right.
of the...
And that's one of our major new subjects that we're talking about.
Right.
Who Israelis are. And I can show you an ad we're about to test, or that we've actually posted, which shows you a picture of Miss Israel. She happens to be Muslim. Israeli or Muslim, why not?
Right.
And there's, of course, an Israeli Muslim Arab on the Supreme Court.
Right.
You don't have to be Jewish to be Israeli, is one of the lines.
Right. In many,
and that
so
many
Israelis aren't.
That's right.
And even when it comes to Israel's size, I've seen so many misconceptions of people thinking that we are an empire that is on vast lands and we have millions and millions of people without realizing what a small sliver of land Israel is.
But it's because of what Israel has done and its contributions. And unless you know that, you wouldn't know it. I mean, that Israel should be 5th or 8th or even 20th out of 200 countries on earth, considering its size and background and finances. It's incredible.
Incredible. What do you think about the recent survey about the happiest people on earth and Israel coming forth?
I thought that was very interesting. I don't quite know what to make of it. I hope it's true.
Yeah, well, from interacting with Israelis, you know, the way, and that's an interesting gap, the way Israelis perceive themselves as compared to the way they're perceived by the world. You know, Israelis, we look at ourselves as friendly and warm and welcoming. And when you ask people about Israelis or Israel, their perception would be different. It would be cold, you know.
Well, they think it's negative because that's all they've heard. I think there was one time that I saw in the New York Times something that mentioned front page. It was a desalination plant in California that they were building. And it mentioned that Israel invented it. That's the only time I've been reading it all my life that I have ever read anything positive about what they did.
But this is, you have to explain that to me from a professional point of view. So much of it is relevant, it's inspirational, it's empowering. By the way, especially when you speak to college students and who look at the future, and sometimes they get despaired because when they look at the international system, all they see around them is failure and conflict. And without infusing hope into the mix, what is our future going to look like? It's going to be bleak.
Well, it's interesting because looking back, I'd say there were 50 men, I made it up, who, for their own personal gain, murdered millions of people and had wars. It's part of the human beings. We have some good ones too, though. But there have always been a few who abused the situation for their own purposes.
But you're trying to show those, our future generation, a different image, not just of Israel, I dare say, but of humanity and the world, of people doing good for others for no immediate benefit, just for the sake of doing good. I
love a company called Natan, which you've probably heard of.
Absolutely. We've had them actually right here on JBS, and they're doing incredible work all around the world.
I know. Well, I got involved with them and helped them change their name and their logo and stuff like that because I loved what they were doing. They were human beings leaving their everyday life because they had something to add to misery around the world. And they did it free. So it operated on a shoestring. It does incredible work. I think there have been 20 teams to the Ukraine, 2 weeks each. It's doctors and social workers. And it makes me so proud. And when you meet the people themselves, you think, oh my God.
When I sat with Danny and I asked him, where have you been? How come we don't hear? He looked at me and says, you know, Shachar, we're so busy doing that we forget about telling. But I dare say today, Marcella, that telling is important.
Oh, it's vital. And it has gone beyond that because they finally have been recognized by a few other organizations, and they're doing better.
And I just want to say something else, and also for our viewers. Marcella was telling us just now, as we discuss her work on Untold News, she took a moment to speak about Natan, a different organization she's involved with, which is trying to do good on the humanitarian level around the world. And that is also what you're doing here. You're exemplifying for our viewers another principle, which is you are the message. By being the good person that you are, whatever you discuss becomes part of that goodness.
Well, that's very kind.
But it's also true. If I like you, if I feel that you stand up for something proper, when somebody is going to try and tell me something bad about you, I'm going to have the warning light.
Well, that's true about Israel, and you're quite right. If you have a reason to believe something else, if you don't automatically believe negative, that is absolutely true. But it's been such a labor of love. It's been frustrating on occasion. I have pitched some of our major organizations, and sort of like the parade that I mentioned.
Let's talk about the parade. What do you want to say about the Celebrate Israel parade that takes place every year?
I think it's a great idea that there is one.
Great energy. It's wonderful to come together from all over. That's very true.
JCRC runs it and does a good job. The thing I think is missing is that it tells you nothing about Israel. You have different groups marching, and they're good organizations, and they're happy to be marching, but it's such a wasted situation, because imagine if you have 50 groups and each one carried a banner about, let's say, an invention, and told you in a quick sentence what it was and why it should matter to you. And then
it could be something specifically relevant for that group.
Absolutely. It could be the FDA recently approving Israel has a cure for cancer. It could be that you live somewhere where the water is abominable and you need fresh water. It could be that your mother has breast cancer and there's a solution, just freezing the
So
tumor.
you're saying that we have a way of taking existing initiatives and make them even better.
That's right. And in this case, it's an ideal way to have Americans, New Yorkers, anybody who watches the program on Fox, and hopefully a good PR person, cover what they learned from the parade, because there's so much you can tell.
Right.
And
take it up a notch.
It has always bothered me that it was just, it's a nice, happy parade. Well, that's not doing Israel the kind of good it could do it.
Right.
We
can do even more.
Yeah, we can do a lot more.
Sage advice.
Yeah.
Before we run out of time, I want, for the sake of our viewers, if anybody wants to learn more about Untold News, keep in touch with you, see what information they can bring to their community. An executive director of a local community that would like to acquire Tiny Dynamo for the school children, high school and college campuses, for their families, how do they get in touch?
Well, they can email me at Marcella J. Rosen, it's Marcella JROSEN @gmail.com. You can also look up Untold News. We're on the web a lot. Yeah, we have websites and we have a lot of articles.
So Facebook, website.
We have 15 videos we did about 8 years ago on major inventions that are on YouTube that anybody can access. We have the book in English, Tiny Dynamo, Facebook, Instagram, in fact, is where we're going next. And one of the things we're doing there, do I have a second to show you an ad or two?
Sure, absolutely.
All right. Here's an approach. You don't have to be Jewish to be an Israeli.
Right.
And that is a master sergeant, an Arab Israel police officer.
Right.
Here's another one, Arab surgeon or Israeli surgeon, both. And it tells you that 17% of Israeli doctors are Arabs.
Right, exactly to the point that we spoke about.
Here's one that says you don't have to be Jewish to be Israeli. Miss Israel is an Arab. And there's an Arab Muslim on the Supreme Court. That's a little smaller.
Right.
We also have some of the ads I was talking about that, here's one on something called WaterGen, creates water out of thin air.
Right.
Which it does. Iron Dome destroys incoming missiles.
So you also, I can see the information is very visual, easy to digest rather than too wordy and complicated.
That's right. And if you click on it, it'll show you some hashtags.
Marcella, I love it. I want to thank you for taking the time. I could have sat with you for hours and hours, but I urge you, our viewers, to really go online, check out Untold News, and be in touch. There is a lot that you can learn and then share.
Absolutely, and particularly with younger people who know nothing about Israel.
Right, and I think too many people know very little, if not nothing, when it comes to Israel.
I think that's true, and it's one of the rare cases where it's a lot to tell that's interesting and good and vital.
And relevant, right? And relevant.
And
Thank you so much for taking the time to come to our studios here.
Thank you for having me. Delighted to see you as always.
Thank you, Marcella, for all that you do for the state of Israel and for the Jewish people. You're a tremendous example of leadership and vision and hope. And I can tell you that one of the most influential things that I got from you today is to be proactive and not just reactive.
That is major. Because if we have all the materials, all the facts, and they're exciting and vital. They're not irrelevant nonsense.
Yeah.
And we can make a difference.
We can make a difference. Thank you for all that you do. And to your viewers, thank you all for watching. Hopefully you were inspired for some activism rather than just complaining about the world around us. Not just when it comes to Israel, but when it comes to everything we care about, including women's rights and beyond. I hope to see you again as we cast another fascinating eye on Israel. Thank you all for watching.